You realize that someone was all bark and no bite. I was 12 when my stepdad Mark gave me a cute nickname. And that was a lazy N-word. You see, for 2 years straight, Mark had one rule. I wasn't allowed to sleep. While my white siblings could sleep from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I was only allowed to sleep from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. Luckily, I didn't even have to set an alarm clock. Because every morning at 4 a.m., Mark would burst into my room with a flashlight in my face, checking if I was ready to do my character-building chores. This included scrub bathrooms, organizing the garage, having breakfast for when his boys woke up. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because if I made any sort of noise, I'd lose privileges. The privileges in question: eating enough food, drinking enough water. And since my mom worked 12-hour night shifts as a nurse, she never saw any of it. Mark had this whole philosophy about modern kids being soft. When I was in Afghanistan, he'd start every lecture. We functioned on 2 hours of sleep for weeks. Youths today can't even handle getting up early. I'm sure you can guess why. His rules only apply to me. By month 3, I was practically schizophrenic with how much I was hallucinating. Shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Hearing my name when no one called. I've fallen asleep on the toilet twice at my desk. Dozens of times, and once while standing in the shower. The other black kids at my school started calling me the raccoon. N-word because of the dark circles under my eyes. My grades made like a girl's chest during puberty went from A's to D's. All because I could stay conscious long enough to finish tests. Teachers thought I was on drugs and said I fit the stereotype. Even the counselor pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay at home. The breaking point came during midterms. I literally fell asleep standing up during my history presentation, face planted right into the whiteboard. 20 minutes later, the school nurse called my parents. And Mark showed up in his veteran's cap, like he was on a rescue mission. "This is what I'm talking about," he said, shaking his head in the nurse's office. "No self-control. I've tried everything: structure, discipline, consequences. Some kids just don't want to succeed." Counselor ate up every word. "I don't blame you, Mark. Most white folk wouldn't even bother trying to civilize a kid like this. You're fighting genetics here." I tried telling my mom when I got home, but she was exhausted after a double shift and Mark was right there, arm around her shoulders. "He's exaggerating," Mark said calmly. "Teen boys are dramatic. I'm just teaching him discipline." "Bruh, I only get 4 hours of sleep," I managed to whisper. Mark laughed. "See what I mean? The kid can't even keep his lies straight." My mom just sat there saying nothing. "Didn't your guys' ancestors used to spend all day in the cotton field? Anyway, you should be used to this by now." He then threw his head back and cackled. That's when I realized my mom was too scared of Mark to defend me. I wanted to call CPS, but I knew Mark would just sweet-talk his way out of it. So instead I did something I never done before. I went through my mom's jewelry box to find my dead dad's old phone. There I found his brother Jerome's number, texted him on my phone, and asked if he wanted to go on a run with me at 4 a.m. Mark would be at his peak performance by then. When he agreed, I felt a chaotic excitement fill my veins. So on Thursday night, I made sure to be extra lazy at dinner. Dozed off twice, knocked over my water. Mark's eye twitched with anticipation. "Looks like someone needs extra motivation tomorrow," he said, his voice snickering. At 4 a.m. sharp, the flashlight hit my face. But this time Mark brought props. Bucket of ice water and an air horn. He was so excited to abuse me that he didn't even hear the front door open. "Rise and shine, you lazy N-word," he cheered. "Today we're trying something new, since you can't seem to be disciplined." He was then interrupted by the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. "What the F did you just call my nephew?" My uncle's voice bellowed through the house. Behind him, my cousins Deshaun and Terrell. Mark's flashlight swung toward them, his face draining color. This isn't what it looks like," Mark stammered. The beam of his flashlight shook violently, dancing across the ceiling like a dying firefly. That was the moment. That was the exact second the monster I had feared for 2 years shrank into a man. A small, pathetic man holding a bucket of ice water in a room that smelled like teenage sweat and fear. Uncle Jerome didn't shout. He didn't rush in. He just stepped into the room, filling the doorway. Jerome was 6'4", built like a linebacker who had kept his gym membership, and he wore a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush bones. Deshaun and Terrell squeezed in behind him, arms crossed, looking at Mark like he was a stain on the carpet. "You got a bucket, Mark," Jerome said. His voice was a low rumble, like a car engine idling in a garage. "You thirsty?" Mark took a step back, bumping into my dresser. "Who let you in? This is private property. I have a gun in the nightstand. You ain't gonna reach it," Terrell said, stepping forward. He was 19 and had a scholarship for wrestling. "And if you try, you're gonna find out that structure and discipline goes both ways." Mark looked at me. For the first time, his eyes weren't filled with contempt. They were filled with panic. He was looking for an ally. "Tell them," he squeaked. Tell them we were doing drills. Character building. I looked at Mark. Then I looked at the bucket of ice water sloshing in his trembling hand. Then I looked at the air horn in his other hand. He calls me the N-word, I said. My voice was raspy from sleep deprivation, but it cut through the room. Every day. And he was about to dump that on me. Jerome's eyes narrowed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He walked over to Mark. He didn't run, he sauntered. He took the bucket from Mark's hands. Mark didn't resist. He was paralyzed. You like ice water, Mark? Jerome asked softly. No. Splash. Jerome upended the bucket over Mark's head. The ice cubes clattered against his skull and shoulders. Mark gasped, sputtering, shivering instantly as the freezing water soaked his veteran t-shirt and pajama pants. Cold, isn't it? Jerome asked. Wake-up call. Mark wiped his eyes, shivering. I'm calling the police. This is assault. You people. You break into my house. We didn't break in, Deshaun said, holding up his phone. We have a text invitation from the resident. And the front door was unlocked. Probable cause? We heard a grown man screaming racial slurs at a minor. The hallway light flicked on. My mother stood there, blinking, her hair messy from sleep. She looked at Jerome, then at the soaked Mark, then at me. Jerome, she whispered. What is going on? Your husband was about to waterboard my brother's son, Jerome said, turning to face her. And from the look of the boy, the bags under his eyes, the ribs showing through that t-shirt, this ain't the first time. He's exaggerating, Mark chattered, his teeth clicking together from the cold. Patricia, tell them to leave. They're trespassing. My mom looked at me, really looked at me. For 2 years, she had been working double shifts, coming home to a clean house and a quiet son, listening to Mark's stories about how improved I was. She had chosen blindness because seeing was too hard. But you can't ignore 3 large men and a soaked husband in a small bedroom. Mom, I said. I haven't slept past 4 a.m. in 2 years. I'm dying. Mark lunged forward, trying to regain control. Don't listen to him, Pat. He's lazy. He needs. Jerome put a hand on Mark's chest and shoved. It wasn't a punch, just a push. Mark flew back, tripping over his own wet feet, and landed hard on his butt. He needs a father, Jerome spat. Not a warden. Patricia, pack his bag. What? My mom froze. Pack his bag, Jerome repeated. He's coming with me. Tonight. Or I call CPS, I call the news, and I show them the pictures I just took of this room. He gestured to the checklist taped to my wall. 0400, wake up. 0415, scrub grouts. 0500, garage organization. You can't take him, Mark snarled from the floor. That's kidnapping. It's a rescue mission, I said. It was the first time I had used Mark's military lingo against him. My mom looked at Mark, shivering on the floor, looking small and pathetic. Then she looked at me. A crack formed in her exhaustion. She walked over to my closet and grabbed my duffel bag. But, Mark screamed. If he leaves, don't you think about coming back? My mom paused. Her hands were shaking. She stuffed my clothes into the bag, my few shirts, my school uniform. She handed it to me. Go, she whispered. You coming? I asked her. She looked at Mark. The fear was still there, deep in her eyes. I have to sort this out. I can't just leave. The mortgage, He's leaving, Jerome said, putting a hand on my shoulder. We'll handle the rest later. As we walked out of the house, Mark scrambled to the window, yelling threats into the dark morning air. You're soft. You'll never make it in the real world. You need me. I got into Jerome's truck. The heater was on. It was warm. Put your seatbelt on, nephew, Jerome said. I buckled up. As the truck pulled away, I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. I leaned my head against the cool glass. Uncle Jerome? Yeah. Can I sleep? Jerome looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes soft. Yeah, kid. You can sleep as long as you want. I was out before we hit the highway. The next 3 months were a blur of recovery. Living with Jerome was different. It was loud. He had 2 dogs and Deshaun and Terrell were always arguing over video games. But it was a safe loud. I slept for 14 hours the first day. When I woke up, I panicked, thrashing in the sheets, looking for the flashlight, waiting for the air horn. Jerome was sitting in a chair by the door, reading a book. Easy, he said. It's 2 p.m. You missed breakfast. We saved you some pancakes. I cried. I sat there in the guest bed and just sobbed until my throat hurt. Jerome didn't tell me to man up. He just sat there and let me do it. But Mark wasn't done. 2 weeks later, the legal papers arrived. Mark was suing for custody, claiming Jerome had kidnapped me. He spun a story to the police about how my uncle was a gang affiliate, Jerome was a dentist, and that I was a troubled youth who had run away to escape discipline. We had to go to family court. I was terrified. I thought Mark would charm the judge. I thought he would show up in his veteran's cap and talk about duty and honor, and the judge would send me back to the 4 a.m. wake-up calls. He's going to win. I told Jerome as we put on our ties. He always wins. He talks circles around people. He wins when he controls the room, Jerome corrected. He wins when no one checks his paperwork. Today we checked the paperwork. We walked into the courthouse. Mark was there with my mother. She looked thinner, more tired than before. Mark was wearing a suit that was a little too tight, standing tall, smirking at me. Straighten your back, he hissed as I walked past. I didn't flinch. I just kept walking. In the courtroom, Mark played his part perfectly. Your Honor, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. I took this boy in. I treated him like my own. Yes, I have strict rules. I believe in excellence. Is it a crime to want your son to be up early, seizing the day? I was trying to keep him off the streets. The judge, an older white man, nodded along. My heart sank. He was failing school, Mark continued. Disrespectful. I was the only one trying to save him. Then it was our lawyer's turn. Miss Steinberg. She was 5'0" and looked like a librarian, but Jerome said she was a shark. Mr. Mark Reynolds, she said, approaching the stand. You reference your military service frequently as the basis for your disciplinary techniques. The Afghan doctrine, you call it? That's right, Mark said, puffing his chest. Served 2 tours. Learned that sleep is a luxury. Interesting, Steinberg said. She picked up a piece of paper. Because we pulled your service records. Mark's smirk faltered. You were a supply clerk, she read. Stationed in Germany. You were never in Afghanistan. In fact, you were discharged early for failure to adapt and insubordination. Is that correct? The courtroom went silent. That's clerical error, Mark stammered. Classified ops. I can't talk about it. You can't talk about it because it didn't happen, Steinberg said. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, this man is a fraud. He built a torture regime for a 12-year-old boy based on a military career that exists only in his head. She didn't stop there. She brought up the school records, the drop from A's to D's coinciding with Mark moving in. She brought up the nurse's logs of me falling asleep in class. And then, she called my mother to the stand. Mark stared at her as she walked up. He gave her a look, a warning. Stick to the script. Mrs. Reynolds, the judge asked. Did you know your husband was waking your son up at 4 a.m. every day? My mom looked at her hands. Then she looked at Mark. Then she looked at me. I saw the moment she decided. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a quiet surrender to the truth. I knew he was strict, she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't want to know how bad it was. Patricia. Mark snapped. Silence, the judge barked. He wouldn't let him eat, Your Honor, my mom said, her voice gaining strength. He monitored the food. He put alarms on the pantry. He said black boys need to learn hunger so they don't become lazy. She started to cry. He called him names. Terrible names. And I was too scared to stop him. Mark stood up. She's lying. She's unstable. This is a conspiracy. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds, or I will hold you in contempt, the judge warned. Mark didn't sit. The facade was cracking. The bark was turning into a high-pitched whine. You people don't understand. I'm the victim here. I put a roof over their heads. Bailiff, the judge said calmly. 2 officers stepped forward. Mark looked at them, then at the door. For a second, I thought he was going to fight. I thought, here comes the bite. But he just slumped. He let them guide him back to his seat. He looked smaller than ever. The judge granted full custody to my mother, with a restraining order against Mark. But since my mom was rebuilding her life, I would stay with Jerome for the school year. As we left the court, Mark was arguing with his own lawyer in the hallway. He saw me. You think you won? He sneered, though his voice shook. You're nothing without me. You'll be back to nothing. I stopped. I looked at this man who had haunted my nightmares. Mark, I said. He paused. You were a supply clerk in Germany, I said. You folded towels. You aren't a soldier. You're just a bully with a flashlight. I walked away. I didn't look back. Life didn't get perfect instantly. I had nightmares for a long time. I hoarded food in my room, granola bars under the pillow, because I was terrified the privileges would be revoked. But slowly the fog lifted. My grades shot back up. I made the track team. Not because I was forced to run at 4 a.m., but because I actually liked running when I wasn't exhausted. 6 months later, I went to help my mom move out of the house. She was divorcing Mark. The foreclosure sign was already on the lawn. Turns out Mark wasn't paying the mortgage, he was gambling it away. The house was empty. Mark had taken his man cave stuff and left. I walked into my old room. The checklist was still taped to the wall, peeling at the corners. The smell of the room brought back a wave of nausea. I'm sorry, my mom said from the doorway. She looked healthier now. She had left him, really left him. I'm so sorry I didn't stop it sooner. I know, I said. I ripped the checklist off the wall. Where is he now? Living in his brother's basement, she said. Posting angry rants on Facebook about how society is crumbling. We laughed. It was a dark laugh, but it was real. As I carried the last box to the car, a beat-up sedan pulled up to the curb. Mark. He got out. He looked rough. Unshaven, wearing sweatpants. He looked at us, then at the moving truck. Stealing my furniture now, he yelled. But he stayed by his car. He didn't come up the driveway. I put the box down. I walked to the edge of the lawn. I was 13 now. I'd grown 3 inches. It's Mom's furniture, Mark, I said. You watch your mouth, boy, he growled. He took a step forward, trying to summon that old intimidation. I still know how to teach you a lesson. Do you? I asked. I took out my phone. Because Uncle Jerome is 10 minutes away, and I think he'd love to see you again. He brings the ice. Mark froze. The mention of Jerome was like a magic spell. He looked at the phone, then at me. He spat on the ground, muttered something about ungrateful brats, got back in his car and drove away. All bark. I watched his taillights fade. I felt a weight finally, truly lift off my chest. I turned back to the house, grabbed the box, and walked toward my mom. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'm wide awake.